I remember the moment like it was yesterday. The air in the grand hall was thick with anticipation, the scent of fresh roses mingling with the faint hint of candle wax. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. My dress shimmered under the chandeliers, my hair perfectly pinned, and Daniel stood at the altar, his smile wide, his eyes full of love. But then, out of nowhere, everything collapsed. Right before the ceremony, my sister Olivia turned to me and said, "You shouldn't be up here." But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. The words hit me like a thunderclap. People stared. Some froze mid-smile, others whispered. I felt every eye in that room drilling into my back, judging, questioning. My cheeks burned. My knees threatened to buckle. I stepped back in silence, and for a moment, the world stopped. Just for me, just for that second, the whole universe seemed to shrink to the space between Olivia's words and the floor beneath my feet. I know what you're thinking. Why would a sister say that? Why in front of everyone? That's exactly what I wondered too. And I wasn't just confused, I was terrified. Terrified because this wasn't the first time Olivia had crossed the line. She had a way of twisting moments, of turning celebration into chaos, and this wedding, my dream wedding, was about to become her latest masterpiece. Let me back up. I need you to understand the stakes here. This wasn't just any wedding. Daniel and I had planned it for nearly 2 years, meticulously crafting every detail. From the hand-picked invitations to the secret first dance song, every choice was ours. Every choice, except apparently one. Olivia. She had always been competitive, even as kids. Remember the sibling rivalry everyone laughs about? That's exactly what this was, but amplified 100-fold, twisted into something that left emotional scars instead of harmless memories. Every birthday, every accomplishment, every little success of mine seemed to provoke a reaction from her, a sneer, a snide remark, a joke that cut deeper than she ever let on. And the worst part? My parents often seemed blind to it, or worse, obliviously complicit. I should have seen the signs that day. Her subtle smirks when I mentioned details of the ceremony. Her helpful suggestions that somehow always made things harder for me. The way she lingered just a little too long near Daniel when she thought no one was watching. I thought I knew her. I thought I could trust her. I was wrong. The moment she spoke, I felt a dizzying mix of embarrassment and disbelief. Guests? Some family, some friends, some people I barely knew looked at me, and in that split second, I realized just how exposed I was. Here I was, supposed to be the bride, standing at the center of attention, and instead, I felt invisible, mocked, humiliated. But the worst part wasn't the room, or even Olivia. It was the sinking feeling that maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't belong here. As I stepped back, Daniel caught my eye. His expression was a mix of confusion and concern. He opened his mouth to speak, but I shook my head. I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I understood why Olivia would say something so cruel, in front of everyone, at the most important moment of my life. And then there was Maya, my best friend, who had been standing discreetly at the edge of the hall. Her eyes widened when she saw Olivia's words land. I could tell she was trying to process the shock, trying to think of a way to intervene without making things worse. That was the thing about Maya. She always noticed the small details I missed, the subtle shifts in energy, the tiny betrayals that could unravel a perfect day. I would soon find out that even she hadn't anticipated just how far Olivia was willing to go. The room was quiet now, but only for a moment. A few whispers rippled through the crowd, barely audible, yet deafening in their effect. I heard fragments. Did she really just say that? What is she doing? Why is Emma stepping back? My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing like a drum in my ears. The very air seemed charged with judgment, and I felt the familiar sting of panic, that gut-wrenching sense of being cornered and powerless. And that's when I started to remember. Not the events of that day, but the patterns. The subtle sabotage over the years. The little lies, the manipulations, the times Olivia had inserted herself into my life and left chaos in her wake. I remembered my first heartbreak, when she had whispered things about Daniel to my friends that weren't true, sowing doubt where there had been trust. I remembered college, when she somehow convinced my parents that I wasn't responsible enough to manage my own affairs. Every time I thought I was building something solid, she found a way to chip away at it, brick by brick, smile by smile. And now this. The culmination. Right here, right now, in front of everyone. She had taken everything I had worked for, my joy, my anticipation, my dignity, and she had twisted it into a spectacle. A public humiliation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to run out the door and never look back. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something inside me held me in place. Maybe it was Daniel's gaze, steady and supportive, a reminder that not everyone was against me. Maybe it was a stubborn streak I had inherited from surviving Olivia's manipulations over the years. Maybe it was just the knowledge that running wouldn't solve anything. Instead, I stepped back quietly, letting her words hang in the air. I watched as she smiled, the kind of smile that hid triumph behind false sweetness. A smile that said, without words, I've won this round. Have you ever been in a moment where the world seems to pivot around a single word, a single look, a single betrayal? That's what it felt like. And the strangest part? Even as I stood there, trying to gather myself, trying to regain some semblance of composure, I knew this was only the beginning. This moment wasn't the peak of the drama, it was the opening act. What came next would reveal secrets I hadn't even suspected, secrets that would challenge everything I thought I knew about my family, my sister, and even myself. Because here's the thing about betrayal, it rarely arrives alone. It comes in layers, like peeling an onion, each revelation more pungent, more eye-watering than the last. And Olivia, my own sister, had prepared a masterpiece. She had planned this for years in subtle ways I hadn't recognized. And now, at my wedding, her plan was coming to fruition. As I took a tentative step back, I caught sight of Daniel again. He didn't look angry, not exactly. He looked concerned, protective. And that made me realize something crucial. This wasn't just about Olivia or me. This was about everything I had built, every relationship I cherished, and every person who had ever believed in me. The stakes were higher than I had allowed myself to admit. And just as I braced myself for what seemed like an eternity, I heard Olivia whisper something to one of the bridesmaids. I couldn't make out the words, but the way the bridesmaid's face shifted from polite attention to a sudden, almost startled worry told me enough. Olivia's game was far from over. The ceremony hadn't even truly begun, yet I was already questioning everything. Was this the sister I had grown up with? Or was this someone new, someone calculating, someone willing to destroy a day that was supposed to be about love? And if she could do this in front of everyone, what else was she capable of? I stood there, heart racing, mind spinning. The music swelled. The guests murmured. And in that suspended moment of fear, anger, and disbelief, I realized one undeniable truth. My wedding day was no longer just a celebration. It had become a battleground. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. I could feel the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on me, like I was under a spotlight I hadn't asked for. My hand tightened around the folds of my dress, as if gripping the fabric could somehow give me the courage to stand taller, or at least hide the trembling in my knees. Guests shifted in their seats, whispering just loud enough for me to catch fragments. Did she really say that? Is she serious? I can't believe this is happening. Each syllable felt like a tiny knife, carving deeper into the shell of confidence I'd spent weeks building. Daniel appeared beside me, his hand reaching instinctively for mine. I could see his worry, his careful attempt to smile, to say something comforting without drawing more attention. Emma. It's okay, he whispered, but his words sounded hollow in the cavern of my panic. Okay. How could anything be okay when your own sister, your blood, your family, just declared you didn't belong at the most important moment of your life? And then came the laughter. Not a loud, boisterous kind, the cruel, subtle sort that makes your stomach drop. A few guests smirked, others exchanged knowing glances, and in that instant, I realized something devastating. People were already taking sides. Some would always see me as the bride, the innocent, the victim. Others would see me as the fool, the person foolish enough to believe she belonged up there when clearly Olivia had the authority, or so it seemed. I tried to pull myself together, to focus on the small things that had always grounded me, the intricate lace of my gown, the way the sunlight caught the crystals in my hairpiece, the soft murmur of the organ. But Olivia's words were a storm that refused to be drowned out. I couldn't stop hearing them. "You shouldn't be up here." They echoed in my mind like a distorted record, replaying over and over, each repetition worse than the last. I had always known Olivia was competitive. That much wasn't a secret. But I had convinced myself that this day, my day, was immune. Surely she wouldn't dare. Surely she would put aside her pride, her jealousy, her manipulative streak, for my wedding. I had been naive. I had been blind. And now, as I glanced at her standing near the front of the hall, her posture perfect, her smile almost angelic, I realized just how wrong I had been. The whispers continued. I felt them crawling along the back of my neck, brushing past my ears, seeping into my thoughts. Even the bridesmaids weren't immune. I caught one of them exchanging a look with Olivia, a look that said more than words ever could. My mind raced. Was this planned? Had Olivia orchestrated this moment down to the smallest detail, every glance and smirk, every pause, every flicker of attention designed to humiliate me? I wanted to disappear. I wanted to vanish into thin air and reappear somewhere safe, somewhere I could breathe again. But that wasn't an option. The guests were here. Daniel was waiting. The ceremony was about to begin. And despite every instinct screaming at me to run, to crumble, to break down in tears, I had to stand. I had to act like everything was fine, even though everything had just shattered. My mind drifted to Maya, who had been hovering near the edge of the hall, watching with wide eyes. She had always been my anchor, the one who saw what others didn't. But even she looked momentarily stunned, unsure of how to intervene without making the situation worse. Maya had a sharp mind, a quick wit, and a loyalty I could always count on, but in that moment, she too seemed at a loss. And that was terrifying. Because if she didn't know what to do, who could? I took a shallow breath and tried to focus on Daniel's face. His eyes met mine, steady and reassuring, reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in this. But as I clutched his hand, I noticed something else, a subtle tension in his jaw, a flicker of doubt in his gaze. He didn't understand why Olivia would do this. No one did. And yet here we were, trapped in a spectacle I hadn't signed up for, a betrayal that felt like it had been planned for months. I remembered the early signs, the small, almost imperceptible moves Olivia had made over the past few months. The little suggestions she had offered that somehow made everything more complicated. The way she helped with seating arrangements, but insisted on putting herself in a prominent position. The way she subtly influenced the florist to add colors I hadn't chosen. The way she whispered doubts about Daniel to my family when she thought I wasn't listening. None of it had seemed like sabotage at the time, but now it was all clear. This moment, this humiliation, was the apex of a pattern I hadn't recognized until it was too late. The hall seemed to contract around me. I could feel the air thickening, pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. Every whisper, every glance, every muted gasp amplified the feeling of exposure. And then, just when I thought I might lose my composure completely, I noticed the wedding planner, who had been standing quietly at the side, giving me a subtle nod of reassurance. Her eyes said, without words, "You're still in control. You can do this." Her encouragement helped a little, but not enough. Olivia was still there, smiling that same infuriating smile, her eyes sparkling with triumph. I wondered what she had whispered to the bridesmaid. I couldn't hear the words, but the expression on her face shifted, confused, alarmed, tense. And in that instant, I realized that Olivia's plan might have deeper layers than I had imagined. Whatever she had done, it wasn't just about embarrassment. It was about control. It was about power. Daniel squeezed my hand gently, breaking me out of my spiraling thoughts. "You can do this," he murmured again, this time with a little more urgency, a little more insistence. I nodded, forcing a tight smile, but inside, I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a cliff. Every step I took toward the altar felt heavier than the last. Every breath was a struggle. And the whispers in the room, the eyes on me, the calculated malice in Olivia's glance, it all threatened to pull me under. I kept thinking about what it meant that my own sister could do this to me. How could someone so close, someone who had shared my childhood, my secrets, my family, act with such cruelty, in such a calculated way, right at the peak of my happiness? It made no sense. And yet, when I looked at her, I could see the answer in her eyes. It wasn't just jealousy. It wasn't just spite. It was something deeper. Something she had been building toward for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And she had chosen today. My wedding day. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you love, someone you trust, turns into an enemy in the blink of an eye? That's exactly what this felt like. And what made it worse was that I couldn't let anyone see my fear, not the guests, not my family, not even Daniel. I had to maintain composure, to appear calm and collected, even though my heart was pounding like a war drum in my chest. I took another step back, trying to regain control, trying to gather myself. The organist had started to play again, the music swelling through the hall, a sound that should have been beautiful and uplifting. Instead, it felt like a countdown to disaster. The whispers grew louder, the stares more intense. And then, almost imperceptibly, I noticed Olivia leaning toward one of the bridesmaids, her lips moving in a silent whisper. The bridesmaid's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing her face. That's when I knew. Olivia's game was far from over. This wasn't just a moment of humiliation. This was the opening move in a chess game I hadn't realized I was playing. Every glance, every word, every calculated pause was part of her strategy. And I had no idea what her next move would be, or how devastating it might be. As I stood frozen, caught between the altar and the whispering crowd, one thing was painfully clear: the silent crisis had begun. And I was right in the middle of it. But just when I thought I might finally gather the courage to step forward, to reclaim my place, I heard it, a soft, deliberate murmur from Olivia, directed at someone I trusted, something I wasn't supposed to hear. And in that moment, my stomach dropped. Whatever she had planned, whatever she had whispered, it was going to change everything. And I had no idea if I was ready for it. I wish I could say that what happened at the wedding was a total surprise. But if I'm being honest, Olivia had been setting the stage for this moment for years. The seeds of betrayal were planted long before the hall filled with guests, long before Daniel and I had picked flowers or chosen our music. They were there in the shadows of my childhood, growing quietly, almost invisibly, until they burst into full bloom at the one moment I thought I could finally shine. Olivia and I had always had a complicated relationship. On the surface, we looked like sisters. Sharing birthdays, arguing over clothes, laughing over silly childhood secrets. But beneath that veneer of normalcy, there was something darker. A rivalry that no one fully understood, sometimes even me. She had a way of turning my achievements into her opportunities, of making my success feel like a reflection on her own shortcomings. And it wasn't subtle, it was insidious. I remember my 10th birthday party vividly. I had begged my parents for a small, simple celebration with just a few friends. Olivia, of course, made it about her. She arrived late, wearing a glittering dress she had borrowed from one of my friends, and somehow managed to steal everyone's attention. My parents didn't notice, or maybe they did and didn't care. They were always a little blind to the dynamics between us, but I felt invisible. That day, for the first time, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. Olivia thrived on controlling the narrative, on turning every situation into a stage where she was the star. High school wasn't any better. While I focused on academics, scholarships, and building a sense of independence, Olivia focused on influence. She had friends in all the right circles, a charisma that drew people to her, and a knack for saying just the wrong thing about me in just the right tone to make it seem like a joke. Teachers, classmates, even my friends sometimes. She had them wrapped around her finger. I learned early on that no matter what I achieved, no matter how careful I was, she could always find a way to undermine me. Even in college, the pattern continued. She managed to charm my parents into believing she was always the responsible one. She insinuated that I wasn't ready for certain responsibilities, that I needed guidance, that I might not be capable of managing my own life. Every friendly suggestion she offered felt helpful at first, but in retrospect, it was a calculated move. A nudge here, a whisper there, all building toward a moment when I would be most vulnerable. And then there was Daniel. From the very beginning, Olivia had something to say about him. She questioned his intentions, spread doubts about his character, whispered to my parents that I should be careful. Every subtle comment, every sideways glance was designed to destabilize my confidence. And somehow, no matter how much I loved Daniel, no matter how strong our bond, I found myself second-guessing things I had never questioned before. I often wondered why she did it. Was it jealousy? Insecurity? A need to assert dominance over someone she thought she could always outshine? Or was it something darker, something more deliberate, something she had been plotting for years without my knowledge? Whatever the reason, it didn't matter in the end. The effect was the same. My life, my milestones, my happiness had been consistently threatened by the very person who should have been my closest ally. Looking back, I can see the small betrayals that led up to the wedding day. The seating arrangements she helped design, which subtly placed her in the center of attention. The way she influenced the florist to tweak colors and arrangements to suit her taste rather than mine. The whispered comments to the bridesmaids, the subtle manipulation of my family's perceptions. She had created a web so intricate that stepping into the wedding hall felt like stepping into a trap. Even my parents had been unwitting participants in her schemes. Karen, my mother, always seemed to favor Olivia, perhaps because she saw a reflection of herself in her. Robert, my father, was well-meaning but often oblivious, missing the undercurrents entirely. Their inability or unwillingness to notice the subtle power plays left me vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, Olivia thrived. Maya had warned me. She always did. She's going to try something, Maya had said weeks before the wedding, her voice cautious but firm. She always does. Just be ready. I hadn't taken her seriously. I wanted to believe that, for once, Olivia would let me have my moment. I wanted to believe that love, celebration, and family could override old grudges and rivalries. But deep down, I should have known better. Deep down, I should have remembered the countless times I had fallen for her charm only to be blindsided later. Even small things in the weeks leading up to the wedding hinted at the storm to come. A misplaced invitation here, a forgotten detail there, a subtle comment meant to sow doubt. Each instance on its own seemed minor, almost insignificant, easy to dismiss. But together, they formed a pattern, a warning that, if I had paid attention, might have saved me from the public humiliation I now faced. I realized then that Olivia didn't just act impulsively. She planned. She plotted. She waited for the perfect moment when the stakes were highest and the crowd was largest. My wedding wasn't just an event for her, it was the ultimate stage. And on that stage, she would perform her masterpiece. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just at her, but at myself. How had I been so blind for so long? How had I allowed myself to be manipulated, to doubt my worth, to think that my sister's approval, or disapproval, defined my place in the world? I felt a mix of shame and determination. I would not let her win. Not today. Not ever. And yet, the fear remained. Because even as I steeled myself to face her, I couldn't predict her next move. She was unpredictable, clever, and merciless when it came to controlling a situation. Every step forward felt like a gamble, every interaction a potential trap. And the thought that she had already planned something even more devastating made my stomach churn. I tried to focus on Daniel again, on the life we had built, on the love that had brought us here. But even that was complicated now. Olivia's whispers had the power to seed doubt, and for a moment, I wondered if she had gone too far this time. Could she actually manipulate a room full of our friends and family against me? Could she turn my wedding day into a spectacle of public embarrassment so expertly that even Daniel might question me? And then it hit me. This wasn't just about the wedding. This wasn't just about Olivia. This was about a lifetime of power dynamics, betrayals, and carefully orchestrated manipulation. And as I realized the magnitude of what I was up against, I felt a chill run down my spine. This was bigger than I had imagined. This was a battle for my dignity, my happiness, and my life as I had envisioned it. Just as I began to collect myself, to try and breathe through the panic, I noticed something subtle, but alarming. Olivia wasn't standing still. She was moving, gliding almost imperceptibly toward a group of our closest family members, whispering, smiling, gesturing in ways that suggested yet another layer of her plan was about to unfold. I couldn't hear her words, but I didn't need to. Her intent was clear. Whatever she had in mind, it was coming. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. The battle had only just begun. The silent crisis, which had started with a single cruel sentence, was about to escalate. And I had no idea just how high the stakes would go or who would emerge victorious. But one thing was certain. Olivia wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. I knew Olivia had always been manipulative, but I hadn't fully understood the extent of it until that day. There I was, trying to steady my shaking hands, trying to convince myself that I could still walk down the aisle and salvage the day, when a revelation hit me like a tidal wave. Something I hadn't anticipated, something that changed the entire narrative of the morning. Olivia's betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was meticulously strategic. It started with a note. I found it tucked behind the programs for the ceremony, slightly crumpled, almost hidden. At first, I thought it was a leftover from some wedding vendor, an inconsequential scribble. But as I unfolded it, my stomach sank. The note wasn't from a florist or the planner. It was from Olivia. Her handwriting, elegant and deliberate, left no doubt. And the content? A chilling roadmap of everything she had been planning. She had anticipated every possible scenario, every moment in the ceremony where she could undermine me. She had planned who would be seated where, who would whisper what, even which friends might be swayed to feel uncertain about me. There were timelines, diagrams, and notes about my own behavior. When I might falter, when I might hesitate, and when she could exploit it for maximum effect. Reading it, I felt a mix of horror and disbelief. It was one thing to know your sister is competitive, even cruel. It was another to realize she had been planning your humiliation down to the last detail for months, if not years. I remember sitting down on the edge of a chair, my fingers trembling, the note clutched tightly. I tried to read it again, slower this time, hoping that maybe I had misunderstood, that somehow there was a reasonable explanation. But there wasn't. Every word, every calculated move, every tiny manipulation confirmed what I had long suspected. Olivia had orchestrated this moment. She had studied my patterns, my weaknesses, even my joys, and designed a plan to destabilize me. I think what cut the deepest was realizing that she hadn't acted impulsively. This wasn't a petty sibling spat. This wasn't jealousy gone wild in a moment of anger. This was cold, methodical strategy. She had waited for the perfect moment, my wedding day, to execute it, ensuring maximum visibility and maximum impact. And she had the audacity to do it in front of everyone I loved. As the music played softly in the background, I replayed the memories of the past few months. The helpful comments about my dress, the gentle nudges that made me question minor decisions, the whispers she had shared with my bridesmaids and parents. I saw the pattern now. Every subtle act had been part of a larger plan, an intricate web of manipulation designed to make me doubt myself, to make me falter when the spotlight was on me. And then I remembered something else. A conversation I had overheard weeks ago, one that at the time had seemed harmless, almost trivial. Olivia had been on the phone, speaking softly, but not quietly enough for me to miss. She'll never see it coming. Everything she believes, everything she trusts. I'll twist it all. At the time, I had laughed it off. Surely she couldn't be that calculated. Surely not. But here it was. Proof. Confirmation. My worst fears realized. Olivia had been planning, manipulating, and controlling from the shadows, and now her actions had reached a crescendo. I couldn't help but think about Daniel. How much of this had reached him? Would he understand the scope of her manipulation? Could he even believe it? I could see the concern in his eyes, the confusion, and I wondered if he had noticed the small inconsistencies, the strange behavior from Olivia, the subtle ways she had tried to undermine me. Or maybe he had been distracted, caught up in the ceremony, and oblivious to the patterns I was only now recognizing. I also thought about my parents. How much did they know? Did they see through her carefully crafted facade, or were they as blind as I had once been? The thought made me furious. Not just at Olivia, but at the years of neglect, the subtle favoritism, the inability or unwillingness of those who should have protected me to notice the ongoing sabotage. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into my pocket. I couldn't show anyone yet, not Daniel, not Maya, not the planner. I needed to process this, to strategize, to figure out how to reclaim some semblance of control before the day spiraled further. But even as I tried to steady myself, I knew that Olivia's plan wasn't done. She had more layers, more moves, more secrets I hadn't uncovered. And then it hit me, the most shocking realization yet. The note mentioned something about the final surprise. I hadn't seen it in the room. I hadn't noticed any sign that she had already implemented it. But the wording suggested something big, something catastrophic, something designed to leave everyone, including me, in complete shock. I didn't know what it was, and the uncertainty was suffocating. I tried to take a deep breath, to think logically, to remind myself that I wasn't powerless. I had Daniel, I had Maya, and I had the knowledge now. Knowledge is power, after all. But the truth was, I was still at a disadvantage. Olivia had thought of everything I hadn't. Every detail I hadn't considered, every interaction I hadn't anticipated, every angle I hadn't protected. And now, armed with the revelation of her plan, I had to figure out how to respond without making things worse. The whispers around the hall grew louder. Guests were beginning to murmur about my hesitation, about the subtle tension in my posture, about the strange energy between my sister and me. I could feel eyes on me again, watching, waiting, judging. And I knew that if I didn't act, if I didn't reclaim the narrative, the day could spiral into something irreparably humiliating. I looked at Daniel, seeking reassurance. His hand found mine again, firm and grounding. "We'll get through this," he whispered, and for the first time since Olivia's words cut through the ceremony, I felt a spark of determination. We would get through this. I would not let her ruin everything. Not today. Not ever. But before I could act, before I could even gather my courage, Olivia moved. Not dramatically, not visibly, but with that subtle, deliberate grace that made her presence unavoidable. She leaned toward a bridesmaid, whispered something under her breath, and the reaction was immediate, a sudden shift in expression, a subtle tightening of the shoulders, a glance around the room. Whatever she had said, it had effect. And whatever it was just one more piece of the plan I hadn't yet uncovered. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The secret I had discovered, the note, the timeline, the plan was frightening enough. But Olivia's whispered words in that moment reminded me of one undeniable truth: the game wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. And the final surprise, whatever it was, would change everything. I had no idea what it was. I only knew I had to find out. And in that moment, standing at the precipice of humiliation and revelation, I realized that the secret Olivia had been hiding wasn't just about control or jealousy. It was something far bigger, something that could alter the course of my wedding, my family, and my life in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. But what came next would push me to the edge of everything I thought I knew, and no one, not even Daniel, would see it coming. The morning of the ceremony had started like any other, at least on the surface. The sun poured through the tall windows of the bridal suite, painting the walls gold, the air filled with the scent of lilies and fresh perfume. But beneath the surface, the atmosphere was electric, taut with anticipation and fear. I could feel it in my bones. Olivia was moving, calculating, planning her next strike. I tried to ground myself in the familiar rhythms of the morning. The veil needed adjusting, the makeup touched up, Daniel's nervous texts answered. I repeated the calming exercises I had learned in therapy, telling myself that I was in control, that the day was mine, that the wedding was supposed to be a celebration of love. But every time I tried to focus on the joy, my mind returned to Olivia. I knew she was somewhere in the building, watching, waiting, plotting. And I couldn't shake the thought that she was about to ruin everything. When the bridesmaids filed in, their smiles and chatter did little to ease my tension. Some glanced nervously in my direction, sensing the undercurrent of drama. Others, unwittingly or intentionally, played into Olivia's game. I had learned to read the subtle cues, the quick look, the slight hesitation, the shift in posture that spoke volumes. Everything felt charged, every gesture weighted with potential betrayal. Daniel appeared at the door of the suite, his hand extended. "Emma, are you ready?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with worry. I took his hand, drawing strength from his presence, even as the tight knot of anxiety in my stomach refused to loosen. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, forcing a smile that I hoped looked genuine. We moved through the hallways toward the ceremony room, each step echoing ominously on the polished floors. The closer we got, the more I felt the tension mounting, like a storm gathering before the first clap of thunder. I could hear the faint hum of guests settling in, the soft rustle of programs being adjusted, the nervous laughter that always precedes a major event. And then, just as we rounded the corner to enter the hall, I caught sight of Olivia. She was standing near the front, the picture of composure, every movement deliberate, every smile practiced. She caught my eye for a brief second, and in that moment, the full weight of her intent hit me. She wasn't just here to witness the ceremony. She was here to dominate it, to control it, to undermine it in ways I couldn't yet predict. I tried to steady myself, to focus on the moment, but a shiver ran down my spine. The hall was breathtaking. Rows of white chairs lined the aisle, adorned with delicate floral arrangements. Candles flickered along the edges, and the soft strains of a string quartet filled the space with a sense of solemnity and elegance. It should have been perfect. It should have been magical. But all I could see was Olivia's looming presence, a shadow over every detail I had worked so hard to perfect. As I stepped forward, my heels clicking softly on the polished floor, I felt the eyes of the guests on me. Their gazes were a mix of admiration, curiosity, and subtly, almost imperceptibly, judgment. Olivia's whispers and glances had already set the tone, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of those who had come to celebrate. I could feel it, a subtle shift in energy, the way some faces stiffened, the way conversations paused when they thought I wasn't looking. Daniel stayed close, his hand brushing against mine, a quiet anchor in the storm. "You're doing great," he whispered, but I knew the real challenge hadn't even begun. Olivia had more than just words. She had influence. She had allies. She had a plan, and it was unfolding with terrifying precision. The music swelled, signaling the start of the ceremony, and I took a deep breath. Every step down the aisle felt heavier than the last, each movement a test of endurance and composure. I tried to focus on Daniel, on the vows we had written together, on the love that had brought us here. But Olivia's presence was a constant, nagging reminder that control was slipping from my hands. I noticed small things, subtle shifts in the room that weren't accidental. A bridesmaid hesitated, glancing toward Olivia before adjusting her position. A guest shifted uneasily, following a subtle nod or gesture from my sister. Even the planner, usually calm and professional, seemed momentarily flustered by Olivia's precise timing and whispered instructions. Every detail of the ceremony was being influenced, subtly and deliberately, by someone who had no right to wield that power. My mind raced. How had I underestimated her so completely? How had I failed to anticipate that someone I trusted so deeply could turn into such a formidable adversary? And more importantly, how would I respond? Could I reclaim the ceremony, my dignity, my day? Or was I already too entangled in Olivia's web to escape? I tried to focus on the vows, on the words Daniel would speak, on the promise we were about to make to each other. But even then, a small panic gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. What if Olivia had more tricks up her sleeve? What if the final surprise hinted at in the note was something catastrophic, something I couldn't recover from? As I reached the front, preparing to take my place beside Daniel, I noticed Olivia leaning toward a guest, whispering again. The guest's expression shifted: surprise, shock, perhaps even alarm. I couldn't hear the words, but the effect was clear. Whatever Olivia had whispered, it had already begun to ripple through the room, altering perceptions, creating doubt, and heightening tension. I felt a surge of determination. I couldn't control everything, but I could control my reaction. I could reclaim my presence, my voice, my role in the ceremony. I squared my shoulders, lifted my chin, and met the eyes of the guests with as much confidence as I could muster. Daniel mirrored me, his gaze steady and reassuring, and together we took our places. But even as we began, I knew the battle wasn't over. Olivia had layers, contingency plans, and subtle manipulations that I hadn't yet uncovered. Every move I made, every word I spoke, every glance I gave could be twisted, undermined, or redirected to serve her agenda. And then, just as I was beginning to find my footing, I saw it. A subtle motion, a fleeting gesture from Olivia toward one of our closest family members. A nod, a smile, a whisper that no one else could hear. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. She wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Whatever she had planned next, it would change everything, and I had no idea if I was ready for it. But the music played on, the guests waited, and I had no choice but to face the day and whatever storm Olivia had prepared for me head on. And what came next would push me to the edge of everything I had ever believed about trust, family, and love, and nothing would ever be the same again. The ceremony had barely begun when I realized the full extent of Olivia's plan. Every whispered word, every subtle gesture, every carefully planted seed of doubt was starting to take hold. I could feel the tension in the room like electricity, sparking and crackling with every movement. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to focus on Daniel, tried to remind myself that I could handle this, but deep down, I knew this was beyond anything I had faced before. It started with small, almost imperceptible things. A bridesmaid hesitated when handing me the bouquet, her hands trembling slightly as if caught between loyalty to me and influence from Olivia. One of my cousins shifted in his seat, a look of confusion passing over his face as he glanced at my sister. I could feel it. The subtle ripple of doubt spreading through the crowd, a silent contagion fueled by Olivia's presence. Then came the whispers. They weren't loud, not yet. Just faint murmurs that brushed against my ears, enough to make me question myself, to make me second-guess everything. "Is something wrong?" someone asked softly behind me. I forced a smile, nodding, but inside I was crumbling. Every word Olivia had planted, every tiny manipulation she had carefully crafted, was coming to life, and I had no control over it. And then she spoke. Not loudly, not in a way that everyone could hear, but with the precision of a trained actor. Her words reached the ears of the wrong person, or the right person, depending on how you looked at it. A whispered comment, seemingly casual, directed at one of my guests, but intended to provoke. I watched as the expression on the guest's face shifted from polite attention to outright disbelief, a flicker of judgment crossing their features. That's when I realized just how powerful her influence was. One sentence, one tiny action, and she had managed to create chaos in a room full of people who should have been celebrating with me. I felt my knees weaken. My hands clutched the folds of my dress so tightly that I could feel the fabric cutting into my skin. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, to hide, to vanish from the room entirely. But I couldn't. I was the bride. I had to stand there, to face this public storm, to continue the ceremony even as every ounce of composure I had built evaporated. Daniel noticed it, of course. His hand found mine, firm and grounding, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the flicker of worry in his eyes. He had sensed something was wrong, though he couldn't yet comprehend the full scope. I wanted to tell him, to explain, but I didn't have the words. How could I describe the intricate web Olivia had woven, the years of subtle manipulation that had led to this moment? He would think me paranoid. He would think I was overreacting. And worse, it might make the humiliation even worse if I drew attention to it. The whispers grew louder. Guests exchanged confused glances, their eyes darting between me and Olivia, searching for some explanation they couldn't find. I could hear fragments. "I didn't know, is that true? I can't believe it." Every phrase cut through me, every look felt like a dagger. And through it all, Olivia remained serene, her smile perfectly composed, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of someone who knows they have won, at least for now. I tried to focus on the vows, to draw strength from the words Daniel and I had prepared. But even as I spoke, I could feel the energy in the room shifting, the weight of judgment pressing down like a physical force. Every sentence I uttered felt hollow, every word strained. I could sense the subtle skepticism growing, the quiet questioning of my worth, my role, my place at the altar. And then it happened. The moment I had feared but hadn't fully imagined. Olivia moved again, this time with deliberate precision. She approached one of the key family members, leaned in just enough, and whispered something that I couldn't hear but could see the effect of immediately. A gasp, a sudden stiffening of posture, a flash of concern that rippled outward. In that instant, the room's energy shifted completely. People began to murmur openly now, the tension breaking into audible whispers. I could hear some voices clearly. Is this really happening? Did she really? I thought this was supposed to be her day. My heart raced, my chest tightened, and I felt the full force of exposure. Everyone in that room, friends, family, colleagues, strangers who had come to celebrate, was now caught in Olivia's web. I realized with a sinking feeling that this was no longer just a manipulation. This was public humiliation, executed with precision and cruelty. Olivia had managed to twist a room full of well-meaning, supportive people into a place of doubt and judgment. She had turned my wedding day, a day that should have been filled with love and joy, into a stage for her to dominate, to control, and to assert power over me in the most intimate, most visible way possible. Daniel squeezed my hand, his gaze sharp, trying to anchor me, to remind me that he was here, that we could face this together. But even his presence, comforting as it was, couldn't erase the sting of betrayal. I had trusted Olivia, assumed that, despite everything, she would let me have this day. That trust was shattered. I felt my face flush, hot, and burning. I tried to steady myself, to focus on the words I needed to say, on the vows that were supposed to define the beginning of our life together. But the whispers, the glances, the subtle manipulations had already begun their work. My confidence faltered, my voice trembled, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely exposed, not just emotionally, but publicly. And then, just as I was struggling to maintain some semblance of composure, I noticed it, Olivia's final move. She had somehow orchestrated the ultimate reveal, a secret she had been holding back, something designed to maximize humiliation at precisely the right moment. I didn't yet know what it was, but the look in her eyes, the slight curve of her lips, the almost imperceptible nod to someone across the room, it told me everything. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Whatever Olivia had planned, it was coming, and I had no idea if I could stop it. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to hide, to escape. But there was nowhere to run and no one to hide from. The eyes of everyone in the room were on me. The weight of expectation, the gravity of betrayal, and the precision of Olivia's plan converged into a single, terrifying moment. And in that moment, I realized something even more chilling. This wasn't just public humiliation. This was a turning point. Olivia had crossed a line, and the consequences would reverberate far beyond the ceremony itself. But what came next would be even worse, something that no one in that room, not even Daniel, could have anticipated. The moment I had been dreading all my life had finally arrived, confrontation. Not just with my sister, but with everything she had been building, manipulating, and controlling behind my back. Every step I took toward her felt heavy, like walking through water. My legs were unsteady, my heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, and yet, despite every instinct telling me to retreat, I knew I had to face her. The hall was quiet now, but the silence was deceptive. The guests had noticed the tension, the subtle shift from awkward murmurs to something heavier, something electric. Some of them exchanged curious glances, sensing the storm that had been brewing between Olivia and me, though no one fully understood its depth. Every eye on me felt like a spotlight, every whisper amplified the fear in my chest, and yet I couldn't let myself falter. I reached Olivia and stopped a mere few feet away from her. She looked up at me, her smile perfectly composed, almost serene, and I felt a wave of anger mix with disbelief. How could someone act so poised, so in control, after the chaos she had orchestrated? My throat tightened, and my voice trembled as I finally spoke. Olivia, why? Her smile didn't waver. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering my question for the first time, and then, slowly, deliberately, she leaned in just enough to make her next words sharp and cold. Why? She echoed. Why what, Emma? Her tone was mockingly innocent, but there was steel beneath it. Why would I make sure you remember today forever? I felt my chest tighten. Every word she spoke was calculated, designed to provoke, designed to break me. This was supposed to be my day. I said, my voice breaking. My wedding. And you ruined it. Why? Olivia's smile widened, a flash of triumph in her eyes. Ruin it? Oh, darling, I didn't ruin anything. I simply revealed the truth. The truth? I echoed, disbelief coloring my voice. What truth? That you've been plotting against me for years? That you enjoy watching me fail? She shook her head slowly, almost patronizingly. It's not about failure. It's about perspective. People need to see who you really are. And today they have. Everyone can finally see what you hide, what you ignore. I'm just the messenger. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Messenger. Not the villain, not the antagonist, but the one delivering a truth that only she thought mattered. And yet, I could see it happening. I could see the guests reacting subtly, the way their expressions shifted, the flickers of doubt and judgment she had planted now blossoming. She had managed to weaponize perception itself, turning reality into a stage she controlled. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Emma? Daniel's voice cut through the tension, calm but firm, a lifeline. He was beside me now, grounding me, giving me the courage to speak again. But even with him there, the confrontation wasn't over. Olivia's presence was suffocating, a vortex of manipulation and control that I had to navigate carefully. You can't just. I started, but she interrupted, raising a hand like a queen commanding her court. Stop trying to control the narrative, Emma. That's what I've been doing all along. Controlling it, shaping it, making sure that everyone, family, friends, even your perfect little fiancé, sees what I see. Her eyes glinted with something dangerous. And today, everyone saw it. Didn't they? I wanted to scream. I wanted to explode, to lash out, to make her feel even a fraction of the humiliation she had caused me. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to think, to act strategically, to regain some semblance of control before the moment spiraled further. I took a deep breath. Olivia, this isn't reality. You can twist words, you can whisper, you can manipulate, but this day is about Daniel and me. Not you. Her laugh was soft, almost melodic, but with an edge that cut deeper than any blade. Oh, Emma. You think this is about the wedding? This is about everything. All those years you've lived thinking you could shine without me noticing, without me asserting my presence. You belong here only if I allow it. Today, I'm reminding you and everyone else of that fact. I felt heat rise to my face, a mix of rage and humiliation. But beneath it, there was also a spark, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Defiance. I realized that while she could manipulate the room, she couldn't control me completely. Not if I chose not to let her. I squared my shoulders, took a deep breath, and looked her in the eyes. I don't belong here because of you, I said slowly, deliberately, letting every word land. I belong here because of love. Because of Daniel. Because of the life we're building. And no matter what you do, no matter how much you manipulate, I'm not leaving. For a moment, I saw a flicker in her expression. Surprise. Confusion. Maybe even admiration, though I doubted it. But it was fleeting. Her mask of composure returned almost instantly. Bold words, she said, tilting her head, a smirk playing at her lips. We'll see how long that lasts. Don't get too comfortable, Emma. The day isn't over yet. Her words were a warning, a promise of more chaos to come. And as I stood there, trembling but determined, I realized that this confrontation was just the beginning. Olivia had set the stage for the ultimate power play, and now that I had seen her hand, I had to figure out how to respond. Fast. Daniel squeezed my hand again, his presence grounding me, reminding me I wasn't alone. Whatever happens, he said softly, we face it together. I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. Olivia had made her move, revealed her strategy, and asserted her dominance, but the day wasn't hers. Not entirely. There was still a story to be written, a ceremony to finish, and a sister to confront on terms I could control. But as Olivia turned, gliding away with the grace of someone who knows they've won, at least for now, I felt a chill run down my spine. The worst wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And I had no idea just how much she had planned for the remainder of the day, or how devastating it would be. The confrontation with Olivia had left the air thick with tension, but it had also sparked something inside me, a determination I hadn't felt in years. For so long, I had allowed her to manipulate, undermine, and control situations, always reacting, always defensive. But now, as I stood there with Daniel's hand gripping mine, I realized that I had a choice. I could either let her win, or I could take control. And I wasn't going to let her ruin my day, or my life, any longer. I drew a deep breath and forced myself to focus. The whispers, the stares, the subtle judgments, all of it was a storm I could weather if I remained calm. If I projected confidence, even just enough to convince myself, the tide could shift. I reminded myself of the note I had found earlier, the roadmap of her manipulations. I had insight now. Knowledge is power. And I intended to use it. I glanced at Daniel. His eyes were steady, unwavering. Ready? He asked softly. I nodded, a quiet smile tugging at the corners of my lips. Let's do this, I said. And in that moment, the wedding hall, the guests, even Olivia herself, began to feel like a stage where I could reclaim my story. The first step was subtle, almost imperceptible. I adjusted my posture, held my head high, and walked with deliberate confidence toward the altar. Every step sent a message. I belonged here. I was in control. I was not a victim. The guests noticed. You could feel it in the room. The shift from tense curiosity to hesitant admiration, a silent acknowledgement that I was stepping into my own power. Olivia noticed too. I could see the flicker of surprise in her eyes, a brief disruption in her composed mask. She had anticipated hesitation, doubt, and fear. What she hadn't anticipated was defiance. And in that moment, I felt the power swing back in my favor. When it came time to speak, I did so deliberately, letting my voice carry across the hall. I addressed the guests. Not Olivia, not directly, but the energy she had tried to manipulate. Today is about love, about family, about commitment. It is not about envy or control. It is not about power or dominance. It is about joy, celebration, and connection. And that is exactly what we are here to honor. The room shifted in response. A few guests nodded, smiles spreading. Even those who had been swayed by Olivia's whispers seemed to reconsider, uncertainty giving way to support. I felt it. A tangible reclaiming of control, a subtle undoing of her influence. Next, I turned my attention to Olivia, who was observing quietly, her expression carefully neutral. I didn't need to call her out. I didn't need to engage in petty arguments. I simply projected calm authority. Every glance, every movement, every word I spoke radiated confidence. And slowly, inevitably, she began to lose her grip on the room. Daniel joined me at the altar, his presence reinforcing the message I was sending. This was our day. Together, we radiated strength, love, and resilience. And in that moment, the focus of the room shifted from Olivia's whispered manipulations to the bond we were celebrating. But reclaiming power wasn't just about appearance or perception. I needed action. I needed to remove the final layers of her influence. So I subtly engaged the guests who had seemed uncertain, drawing their attention, their loyalty, and their understanding. I asked for their support, not by accusation, but by invitation. "Let's focus on what truly matters today," I said, my voice steady. "Let's honor love, commitment, and family. That is what brings us together." It worked. Slowly, deliberately, the tide turned. Smiles replaced furrowed brows. Whispers of doubt faded into murmurs of agreement. The energy shifted, realigning with the purpose of the day rather than Olivia's agenda. And through it all, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. The final move was subtle but decisive. I addressed Olivia directly, not with anger, not with blame, but with a quiet assertion of agency. "Olivia, I know you want control. I know you want attention. But today, that doesn't define the room. Today, love defines the room. And I will not let anything, no matter how carefully planned, undermine that." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of frustration crossing her face. I could see that the mask of composure was cracking, just slightly. She had underestimated me. She had expected fear, hesitation, weakness. And instead, I had presented strength, clarity, and presence. Daniel squeezed my hand again, and I felt the full weight of support and partnership. Together, we were untouchable, anchored in love and mutual respect. The guests responded to that energy, and for the first time that day, I felt the overwhelming sense of belonging I had been fighting for. And then, almost imperceptibly, I noticed a small but significant victory. One of the bridesmaids who had wavered earlier smiled at me, nodding in silent support. Maya, standing at the side, returned a proud, almost triumphant glance. The subtle but powerful forces in my corner were realigning the balance. The web Olivia had so carefully spun was starting to unravel. I realized then that reclaiming power wasn't about confrontation or revenge. It wasn't about shaming Olivia or highlighting her misdeeds. It was about presence, clarity, and intention. By choosing to focus on love, family, and authenticity, I had shifted the energy in the room, reclaiming not just the ceremony, but the narrative itself. But even as I felt this surge of control, I knew the day wasn't over. Olivia would have one last move, one final attempt to assert dominance. I didn't know what it would be, but I was ready. This time, I would face it not with fear, but with strategy, composure, and determination. And I realized something vital: reclaiming power wasn't just about today. It was about the future. It was about setting boundaries, asserting agency, and refusing to be manipulated ever again. And in that moment, I felt an unexpected surge of triumph. But as I looked toward Olivia, poised yet tense, I knew that the final moment of the day, the true climax, was still ahead. And when it came, it would change everything for both of you.